I once used to work with a director who was a chaos magician. He was nuts. I mean, from my point of view, he was nuts. I had great difficulty as a skeptic working with somebody who was a chaos magician, but also being a psychologist and having a sort of bit of a Jungian perspective on things. So I probably would have got better Robert Bly if he was still around. He might still be around. I don't know. Having a bit of a Jungian perspective, talking in archetypes would appeal to me quite a bit. It would be the idea that there was magic that I'd have a problem with. But I was quite happy to talk in archetypes. And you asked me what archetype I was, what tarot card I'd identify with. And I said the Hermit. He said, that doesn't seem like you. I go, it is, I feel like I might have to withdraw from society in the search for truth. And I do find that both the feminist environment and the MRM environment aren't conducive to my work, because I feel like I'm dealing with pieces of a puzzle that I'm trying to put together. And some of the pieces get kicked out of my hand by one group. They go, no, you can't. That's not an idea you're allowed to entertain. I find that particularly true of the feminists. I find it less true with the MRM, but there are still some ideas that get kicked out of my hand in the MRM. If you're not looking for nuance, some of what I say might sound contradictory. For example, if I'm saying there's some really positive aspects to masculinity that really need to be celebrated, and I'm also saying masculinity is forged in adversity, and that sounds like I'm in favour of adversity. How can I be saying, can you stop being so adverse to boys, and at the same time be saying masculinity is really good? What I'm saying is there are a lot of positive aspects to masculinity, but if you think there are negative aspects, which there are at its extreme, in its most extreme form, there are problems with masculinity. If you think the way of avoiding that is to punish people for being masculine, you couldn't be more wrong. Because the more you punish them, the more masculine you're making them. That's where that's coming from. I feel it's time really to talk about refrigerator mums. Refrigerator mums was forged as a theory in the 1950s. I should probably come up with some names, shouldn't I, so we know what we're talking about. Actually, it was forged by Leo Kanner, end of the 1940s, and was attacked by parental groups. And the parental groups were attacking it because there were parents of autistic children that said, we've got enough problems with having autistic children without you accusing us of child abuse as well. And that meant that there was a sort of emotive kickback against the idea that autism may be associated with a lack of warmth and excessive criticism towards a child. However, still there are findings that indicate that this is the case. At least the negative symptoms associated with autism seem to be alleviated if the child experiences warmth and praise, and get worse if the child's subject to criticism. When I say masculinity is forged from adversity, I'm obviously putting forward a social constructivist argument. Social constructivism is not popular with anyone who's of a traditionalist mindset. Traditionalist anti-feminists don't like social constructivism, and I'm putting forward a social constructivist argument. The feminists don't own social constructivism or socialization theory. The feminists don't own socialization theory. It isn't theirs alone. And to continue to champion socialization theories does not mean that I'm continuing to be a feminist. Particularly, my particular brand of socialization theory says it is adversity that makes us masculine. It's the fact that our self-esteem is not protected that makes us masculine. It's the fact that we're unprotected that makes us masculine. It's the fact that we're expected to stand up for ourselves that makes us masculine. It's sex differences in how newborns are treated that Firstly, one of them is when it comes to interpreting a baby's cry. If the baby is a boy, or if the caregiver believes it to be a boy because the baby's been dressed in a blue baby grow, crying will be identified as evidence of the baby being angry. Whereas if it's a girl, or the caregiver thinks it's a girl who's dressed in a pink baby grow, then the caregiver believes that the child is scared. The key thing there was the colour of the baby grow, not the actual gender of the baby. Right? They've put the babies in the wrong baby grows to confuse the caregiver to make an experiment. So you're removing the confounding factor of that actually being the gender of the baby. You're controlling there for the factor that there might actually be a genuine difference between the babies. It's not a difference between the babies, it's a difference between the caregiver's perception of what gender the baby is. And another example, again, stopping baby grows for half of them so that it's controlled for, but the caregiver is fooled into thinking that some of the boys are girls and the girls are boys. The caregiver goes to the girls quicker. If the child cries, the caregiver goes to the girls quicker to pick them up to cuddle them than they do to the boys. I should have put girls in speech marks, because of course I'm talking about the babies that are wearing pink baby grows, not babies that were actually girls. Half of them were girls, and half of them weren't. Same with the boys. Half of those were girls, half of them were boys. It's just they were all in blue. You get the idea. Don't explain it all. You know what I'm talking about. So there is, straight from birth, there is a difference in how boys and girls, there's a difference in the level of pampering given to boys and girls. Girls are given more pampering. Boys are more likely to be left to fend themselves and also be interpreted as being more aggressive. Straight from before they know what they are. You see what I mean? Also, the idea that masculinity is forged in adversity very much runs counter to the feminist point of view that girls are at worse. You can hardly argue that girls are at worse and then say, but one of the reasons that boys are boyish is that they experience more adversity than girls do. It's funny, one of the things that I find with my sort of group of friends is they see the stuff I'm talking about men's rights and they think, oh my god, he's gone off the rails, he's gone mad. And they meet me, and they go, you're looking so well. You're looking the best I've ever seen you. Yeah, it's got to stop being a feminist. On the contrary, me becoming an anti-feminist wasn't me going mad, it was me finding sanity. Just for a point of clarification, because if I don't clarify, it does sound like I contradict myself a lot. When I say I stopped being a feminist, yeah, I stopped identifying as a feminist in 1993. That's an established fact. Okay, I'm not sure about the year 1993. It might have been 1994, early 90s, some point in the early 90s. I can't pinpoint the date. I stopped being a feminist early 90s. So when I say I gave up being a feminist, like that happened recently, yeah, it did happen recently. What I gave up was not identifying as a feminist, but I gave up being a lay feminist or a pro-feminist. What I mean is I finally challenged the underlying worldview that feminism is based on. So I need to clarify those two separate ideas. It's the idea of identifying as a feminist and the idea of being a feminist. A believer. I gave up the religion of feminism very recently. I gave up self-identifying as a feminist quite a long time ago. I think it's all about the benefits of male stoicism and how feminism contributes to male stoicism. Because feminism says the opposite. Feminism says we want boys to be able to express their feelings. No, you don't. Make every effort to make sure that men can't express their feelings, and then say the problem with men is they can't express their feelings. Well, you make every effort to make sure they can't. So I'm about to talk about why Stoicism is sometimes positive, and then I'm going to blame feminism for male Stoicism and claim that feminism is negative. What the fuck are you talking about, Mark? It just makes no freaking sense. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. I'm saying it's positive, but it's not positive at its extreme. And when the Stoicism has to have its extreme, it's very negative. In fact, it drives mental illness, and if feminism is pushing it to its extreme, then feminism has a very negative effect. Especially if it's while it's pushing it to its extreme, it's saying, "Oh, that's what you're really worried about." No, you're not. You're not. You're not worried about that. If you were worried about that, you back off. Firstly, you say women have it worse whenever a man expresses his suffering. Secondly, you say anything that causes a woman discomfort is in some way a form of harassment or some way a form of abuse. You create a whole subset of things that you consider to be emotional abuse, and a lot of them are somebody expressing their feelings. If somebody expresses the fact that they feel jealousy, that's controlling behaviour. If somebody expresses the fact that they might be quite upset if they were rejected, that's considered to be emotional blackmail. Somebody expresses that they're in love. They say, you're not really in love, you're just in love with the idea of being in love. That is not specifically a feminist thing, I realise. I think it's a cultural thing. I think culturally we're romance denialists. As a culture right now, I think we're romance denialists. It reminds me a lot of Brave New World, actually. Sandman. Jesus. Have you seen the Sandman video on vagina monsters? Vagina zombie. I know what it's called now. Zombie vagina monsters. And he's talking about some sort of chemical warfare that women have, apparently. Basically saying, this chemical can get into you if you have sex with a woman, and it means that you want to do anything for her. You know, yeah, it's a pheromone. It's quite normal. What you're talking about is pheromones make you feel like you're in love, and the oxytocin released during sex makes you feel like you're in love. And yeah, being in love means you want to do anything for somebody. What you're talking about there, Sandman, is being in love. And you're talking about it like it's some frightening thing. Well, it is a frightening thing. It's madness. Love is a madness. But it's not new. It's not a part of chemical warfare. It's well documented. It's literature's full of it. There's poems about it and songs about it and films and stuff. It's not, you haven't just discovered this, and it's not a conspiracy against you. Or if it is a conspiracy, it's nature's conspiracy against all of us. It's nature's conspiracy to trick us into producing children. But it's certainly not women's conspiracy as a way of making men into slaves. It's nature's conspiracy in making people slaves to each other, if you want to call it slavery. We're in a romance-denying culture. And that doesn't just come from feminists. But it partly comes from feminists. Partly coming from MGTOW. There's one of my previous videos, there's a bit where I went, I was on the one Sliana Kate, and there was a bit that I was to edit out, and I didn't. It slipped through the net, and I thought, you know what, fuck it, leave it, because I think it's something we need to talk about at some point. I was talking about Christianity and how, the bit, I think I'll really quote Clement Attlee. Clement Attlee said it so much better. I suppose I was trying to say what Clement Attlee honed down to the simple two sentences: believe in the ethics of Christianity, can't believe in the mumbo jumbo. Which is, I think I was trying to say that. But instead of saying that, because it's me and I'm not very good at being concise, I kind of went all around the houses and I said, if I was talking about being against Christianity, I wouldn't be talking about being against ideas like forgiveness and not being a hypocrite and the importance of love. And they went, I mean, brotherly love for your fellow man. I don't mean romantic love, although that's important too. And I thought, that's not a very big thing to say, better not say that. Stupid thing. And I was going to edit it out. And you'll notice when you see that bit of the video that I kind of repeat myself there. And the reason I repeat myself is because I thought I was going to edit it out. Didn't get edited out, stayed in. So, yeah, I think romantic love is important. I think it's an important part of an holistic experience of life. And I'll say this to young MGTOWs, because that's kind of thing of trying to say, avoid domestic relationships with women, avoid getting domesticated with women, avoid marriage. I'm still saying that. Because both of these are systems in which there is an inequality, which is disadvantageous to you and puts you in severe danger. Puts you in severe danger of being an indentured slave. And puts you in severe danger of other things, like being accused of abuse or rape or whatever. But don't be under the impression that one of the risks you're avoiding is having your heart broken. Because that's a risk we all take. And it's not a bad risk to take. And in fact, having your heart broken enriches life. And it won't seem like it enriches life for the first year that your heart's broken. And when you feel like you're dying inside. But in the long run, it does. It enriches your life. It gives life meaning. Not because it gives life meaning, because it's all about your life revolving around somebody else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that it's an emotionally rich experience, and there's nothing wrong with the richness of emotion. If you want to be free of everything, including passion, then what's the point in being free? What's the point in being free when you have no engine to drive it? I think it's a problem with MGTOW. I think it's a problem with MGTOW that's also a problem with feminism, and it's romance denialism. I don't think they believe it exists. Actually, romance doesn't exist. Romance is its very nature is an escapist fiction. But it's an escapist fiction. It's about a real thing. Love is a real thing. Falling in love is a real thing. It's an escapist fiction to make sense of a real thing. And that's how mythology works. Mythology is a way of us making sense of our experiences. The experience is real. Some of the things we attribute to love in the pedestalization of love are wrong. That doesn't mean that it doesn't mean the experience isn't real. For example, it's not true that there's only one person in the world for you. For example, it isn't true that true love lasts forever. For example, it isn't true that love conquers all. For example, there are fictional things that are said about love. Similar problem of nuance there at the beginning, where I'm saying masculinity is very positive, masculinity is for diversity, but I'm not in favour of more diversity. We shouldn't be pretending that romance isn't important. But then one of the things I find particularly offensive is when somebody is talking about men's rights and the person they're arguing with says, "So do you have a girlfriend?" Okay. Well, does that invalidate my feelings, is it? That's invalidated my thinking. Do I somehow need to lubricate myself with Vag juice in order to have a rational thinking brain? I think it's completely irrelevant. Why are you bringing that up? You know why they're bringing it up. They're bringing it up because they're going, you're only speaking out of bitterness. I remember during the second wave of feminism, this was a thing that feminists would hit the roof over if somebody said, she just needs a good seeing to. And that is basically what they're saying. They're doing the same thing. They're going, yeah, he hasn't got laid in a while. You're really using that as an argument to completely debunk somebody's viewpoint. Yeah, and I remember pestered throughout my teens,
By female relatives.
people saying, "Have you got a girlfriend yet?" No, it just made it seem far too important, far more important than it needs to be. So when I say it's important, I'm not saying it's important to have a romance right now. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's important not to be in denial of it. It's important not to be in denial of emotional experiences you legitimately have, including the forming of emotional attachments, which are almost inevitable if you're a human being. I think that's succinctly put. Man, when he's worrying about the fact that if you have sex, you might fall in love, he's actually reinforcing the Sandra stereotype that men experience no emotional depth in their sexual relationships. It's interesting. I knew a feminist who, using the rhetoric that Sandman would use, was definitely riding the cock carousel, i.e., she was going from man to man purely for the physical pleasure of it and not wanting to forge any emotional attachments with them, just using them for pleasure. And she expressed some disconcertion that guys were falling in love with her. She said, "I didn't think that was supposed to happen." So she's got this negative stereotype about men, that men experience no emotional depth, that there's no emotional connection with the people that they have sex with. And this stereotype is extended when feminists talk about adultery. They kind of imply that women have adultery for these reasons that are all about emotion and needing emotional validation and all this sort of thing, whereas men just do it because they want to get laid. This stereotype that for men sex isn't something that's emotionally deep, but for women it is, which is not true. For men it can be very emotionally deep, and for some women it can be very emotionally shallow. Another invalidation of male emotion, pretending it doesn't exist. So, just to return to my cock carousel riding friend, the reason she felt she could without consequence was because she had been fed a misandrous stereotype that men experience no emotional depth when it comes to sex. So, in fact, the very behaviour that Sandman complains about is perpetuated by denial of the very experience that he is concerned about. Yeah, you may find if you have sex with somebody, you develop an emotional attachment to them because it's an emotional experience. It's called making love for a reason, you know. One of the interesting things I've noticed is that the feminists attribute a lot of things to MRAs that are actually things that male feminists say. For example, not all men. That tends to be a thing that male feminists say because they're protecting themselves. It's a self-defensive reaction. And they're hearing a feminist saying negative things about men in general, and the guy's hearing that, he's thinking, well, that doesn't describe me at all, and I'm a man. So he wants to point out that he's an exception to this rule. So he says, not all men. Let's not make generalizations. And they go, not all men. You can't say not all men. That's a very male feminist thing to do, because he's not actually disagreeing with the generalization you're making. Whereas, as an MRA, I disagree with the generalization you're making. I'd say the things that you say about men are not true of most men. They're true maybe of a minority of men. So you don't hear MRAs saying not all men. That's something male feminists say when they're trying to protect their own egos. They're not trying to defend men in general, which we are. So we don't say that. Another example is the feminists are convinced that MRAs complain about the friend zone. Well, we wouldn't. It's not a men's rights issue that sometimes love is unreciprocated. And sometimes the love that's unreciprocated could be with a friend. And in fact, it's very likely to be with a friend because friends are already invested in the friendship. They don't want to risk that by engaging in a relationship, which is a risky behaviour. Friendships often don't survive relationships. There's a very good reason why you would be reluctant to forge a sexual relationship with a friend because you know that friendships don't survive relationships very often. Yeah, so I was listening to myself talk there, and I was going, talking bollocks. That's what happens when I go through editing. You see, I listen to myself. Yeah, I'm not sure that's right. The problem with a skeptic is I'm skeptical even about what I say. This is why at the end of each of the videos I always go, "There's one blind man put in the nature of elephants." So if I didn't do that, I feel like I think it's a disclaimer. Disclaimer, because I go, I don't know. I was listening to that and I was thinking about friendships rarely survive relationships. Yeah, that's true. But actually, if you're friends and you kind of fall in love with each other, or one of you, either you fall in love with each other, or one of you has fallen in love with the other, let's be honest, your friendship's fucked anyway. I mean, if you're holding off to save the friendship, too late. Too late. You just have to let it go. But nevertheless, I can understand there being a dilemma that may feel like there's a really good article actually. I know it sounds like a contradiction in terms because I'm going to have a sentence that has the phrase "really good article" and "good men project" in the same sentence, and you kind of think, surely not, unless there's a "not" in the sentence as well, like there's a really good article, but it's not in the good men. It's a really good article in the Good Men Project, and called "Letting Go of the Banana." It's about that situation. Not that that's the situation we're supposed to be here to discuss. We're supposed to be here to discuss Stoicism. He is coming round to it. He just bloody tangents. It's supposed to be a short video. It's like 50 minutes long already. I'm very critical of myself. I'm very self-critical. What's he doing? I bet Liana Kay is very offended that I did that video about why I criticise her and laugh at her. I do the same to myself, you know. It's any consolation. And not only do friendships not survive relationships, but mutual friendships that you have don't survive. But your mutual friends will then feel a division of loyalties when it's not inevitable that a relationship's going to break up, but it's nigh inevitable. Let's put it that way. It's nigh inevitable. There's very good reasons why you probably won't want to have a relationship with a friend. And then there's also very good reasons why you're very likely to fall in love with a friend. Because the more you know somebody, the easier it is to fall in love with them, right? So, the friend zone itself is not a men's rights issue. But what I think is the denial that it exists. It clearly exists. People have experienced it. And to say that it doesn't exist is invalidating somebody's feelings. Someone talk about an emotional experience they've had, and you're saying, well, that emotional experience didn't happen. Well, yeah, it probably did happen. So that's an example of feminism, certainly in its current form, being contributory to male stoicism. Contributory to the idea of saying your feelings don't matter. And there are obvious reasons why that's more likely to happen to a male feminist than they are to happen to anyone else, because feminism tells men you shouldn't judge women by their external experiences, you should try and get to know them. You should be in love with the essence of who they are, you should be in love with their achievements, you should love with what's invisible. Otherwise you're objectifying them. Well, what else do you know? Before you get to know somebody, what else do you know about them, other than what they look like? So actually, feminism's recommendations to men as how they should form relationships with women actually makes it more likely for you to fall into that friend zone, because you're more likely to have become friends with somebody before you actually have the impetus to desire them, because we're not allowed to desire women purely on their physical attributes. And the other thing, of course, that feminism tells men is an unwanted ovation is not a case of you experiencing rejection. It's a case of you doing something unpleasant to that woman. You made her life uncomfortable. You have imposed yourself on her personal space. So, whereas a non-feminist man, when he's thinking of taking a risk at expressing himself, taking a risk expressing his desire, he's just taking a risk about himself. He's making himself vulnerable. That's all he has to worry about. A male feminist isn't worrying about himself. That's not what deters him. What deters him is the thought of what that could be doing to her. And that's a great thing to worry about, isn't it? And putting yourself at risk is something that's expected of us. But putting a woman at risk, you can do that. So there's another reason why a male feminist is more likely to feel trapped in a friendship that he wants to be something more. And he doesn't quite know how to make it something else. And also, male feminists are hardly encouraged to have self-worth, are they? After all, they're the ones that need to be apologetic for who they are. That's another case where I think, you're not describing MRAs. What you're describing there is disgruntled male feminist. Disgruntled male feminists are not MRAs. Although if you keep treating them that way, if you keep treating them the way you treat them, they'll probably wind up in MRAs before long. So keep going. Keep going. We'll take them. So there's two examples of things that I think are attributed to MRAs. This is what MRAs do, and actually the things that male feminists do. Which I guess, if feminists are looking at their own social circles and picking up the people they think are MRAs, then that is what they're picking up. They're picking up disgruntled male feminists. There are other examples, but that isn't what I was going to talk about. I thought I would use one example to set up the concept, and then another example to talk about that specific thing, which was another aspect of how feminism contributes to male stoicism. It doesn't allow them to talk about emotional experiences that have happened to them by saying that, firstly, that emotional experience didn't happen, and secondly, to think that it happens is just an indication of how entitled you are. So there we go. There's another example of feminism contributing to male stoicism. I wasn't going to do a whole thing on how feminist anti-MRAs, when identifying what they see as the crucial features of an MRA, are actually described as disgruntled male feminists rather than actual MRAs. And I wasn't going to do a whole thing on that. There is one other that I'm going to add, and I think it probably is the three that I noticed. So there was only three I noticed, so I might as well bring this one up as well. The other one is they say, well, they all think they're a nice guy. We don't think we're a nice guy. I've never said I'm a nice guy. Admittedly, this is just my own shtick, and no one else is doing this. This is just my own shtick. When I talk about seeing people as tragic heroes, I have said we all have tragic flaws. None of us are eminently good. None of us, includes men and women, none of us are eminently good. I don't claim to be a nice guy, but I can see why a male feminist is going to say it's all the ones that break the rules. You set up all these rules of what a man should be like, and the ones that break those rules have success. They experience love. They are worthy of love. Whereas those of us that follow all the rules you set up are apparently not worthy of love. I can understand why they would turn around and say, but I'm a nice guy. But you're not a nice guy. I'm going to say to the male feminists that are saying, I'm a nice guy, to anyone watching, again, they'd have to be a tourist. They'd have to have stumbled here accidentally. But I guess there's a male feminist here saying, I'm a nice guy. You're not a nice guy. You're a spineless guy. That's what you are. You're spineless. But that's not your fault. You're spineless because your self-worth has been ripped away from you. You're a doormat. And I'm saying this is tough love. You need to know you're not nice. And even if you, what's so good about being nice? What's so great about being nice if it means you have no self-worth? Get some self-worth, you idiot. Alright, let's talk about the benefits of male stoicism. Now, I realise my audience is mainly male, but I have been thinking about how to convey an explanation of where male stoicism comes from to a woman, so that she would have an insight into it. So that's what follows here. Imagine you're a woman. If you're not a woman. If you are a woman, stay as you are. Okay, imagine you've just had a miscarriage. And it's in the first trimester. You haven't told anyone yet, but you had really got hopes. You've got hopes that this was going to be a child. You were going to start a family. And you had a miscarriage. And you're grieving. You're feeling quite depressed about it. And then you meet a friend, an old school friend you haven't seen in ages. And you thought, oh, that's good, I can have someone to talk to now. Talk to them about this. You meet over coffee. You want to get it off your chest that you've had a miscarriage. You're grieving a little bit. Grieving, we talked about Romeo's not in love, he's just in love with the idea of being in love. Which I kind of objected to as a thing that people say, it's a frequent thing that people say. He is in love. But anyway, that's a side point. In a way, it's not that you were in love with the child, but you were in love with the idea of the child. Because the child doesn't exist yet. The child's just an idea. And it was just a collection of cells in your womb. The collection of cells didn't form a human being. But you're still in love with the idea of a child. The idea died. So you're grieving. And you meet your friend that you haven't seen in years. And she's pregnant. She's 8 months pregnant. She's going to invite you to a baby shower. She's really excited. She's really excited. It's going to be a girl. She's already bought things for it. Look at the things she's bought. Of course, you feel wretched. You feel more wretched than ever. But you're also in a position where you can't express it. You can't express it because to express it, you piss on her parade. She's joyous. How can you destroy that? You can't destroy that. That would be very selfish. So, your feelings of grief, you push down in order to allow her to have her joy, in order to not infringe upon her joy. You suppress your feelings of grief. Her feelings trump yours. If you're a man, half of the population have feelings that trump yours, but you're not allowed to infringe upon, or that you feel that you can't infringe upon. That's what male stoicism, partly. So, part of the positive aspect of stoicism is its consideration of the feelings of others. Another positive aspect of stoicism is it's making sure that your reason isn't clouded by emotion, because when reason is clouded by emotion, dangerous things happen. That's when we get prejudice. Prejudice comes about when fear clouds reason. If panic clouds reason, then you can't find solutions to your problem, because you don't have the rational capacity to find solutions. All you have is the emotive reaction to the problem, and that emotive reaction to the problem isn't solving the problem. Courage is a subset of male stoicism, for example, that is about not allowing fear to be the thing that guides you. It's not a failure to acknowledge fear, it's just not allowing fear to be the thing that forms decisions, that you do what you need to do, despite the fact that what you need to do is something that scares you. One of the benefits of male stoicism clearly is actually hidden in plain sight in the statistic that 70% of non-reciprocal violence is initiated by women. Well, that means that if you're violent with your partner, the chances of them hitting you back are half as likely if you're a woman. Because even when he's been hit, a guy will restrain himself from hitting you back. Now, you might not think of that as male stoicism, but that is male stoicism. That is him controlling his emotions. Because if somebody hits you, your emotional response is going to be angry, and violently angry. So the fact that men restrain themselves even when they're being punched is an example of male stoicism, this thing that you say you're against. I think that women benefit from male stoicism a lot. Because they benefit from it, they're not really against it. The things that women seem to be very proud of is that they believe themselves to be the more empathic and more sensitive of the genders. And they're also complaining about men not expressing their emotions. The thing is, if you're that empathic and that sensitive, somebody doesn't need to make a big display of their emotions for you to know that their emotions are there. You've got to pick up on subtle little clues, and demanding that men express their emotions more suggests to me that maybe you can't pick up on the subtle clues that you think you can. But maybe they're not as adept at being empathic as they think they are. Otherwise, why would we need to theatricalise our emotions? In conclusion, then, so the reason I'm doing this face, I've just listened to all the meandering nonsense I've just said, and I'm thinking, oh, there's no bloody narrative there, that's just all over the place. Anyway, in conclusion, I don't think it's male expression of emotion that's the problem. I think it's the presumption that we don't have emotions. I think that's the issue. But if men are lacking in expression, then putting them under pressure of criticism, and putting them under pressure of being more concerned with the feelings of others, more concerned with the feelings of women, particularly, these things aren't helping. If you're actually genuinely worried that men are doing themselves damage because they're not expressing their emotions enough, well, how about treating them like their emotions matter? And perhaps then they might be more inclined to